Believe it or not, there was once a time when you had to leave your house to rent a movie. I know, sounds bizarre. You would go to your local video store, you would browse the racks for what seemed like hours for a movie that you wanted to watch, and then you would take it home and you would watch it on your VCR, video cassette recorder, for some of you that may not be familiar. Now, before you could watch the movie, you had to rewind it. This was because the person who rented the movie before you probably didn't have the courtesy to rewind it themselves. Thanks. So if you wanted to avoid having the ending spoiled, you had to rewind the tape yourself. Thankfully, we now live in a world where we can rent movies online and watch them from our computers or televisions or phones even. But the hashtag before hashtags ever existed was, are you ready for this? Do you remember? Be kind, rewind. Be kind, rewind. It's a slogan that's stayed with me since the video store days. If your life were a movie on a VHS tape, I'm sure you wouldn't tape over it. Especially with like some really bad, long-forgotten episodes like The Real World. Do you remember that show? But would you really want to tape over your life and do things differently if you could? Be kind. Be kind when you rewind and reflect on your movie, your past. Even if you wish you could tape over it with a totally new life, like when it's late at night and you're tossing and turning, you're wide awake, and then the movie of your life rewinds in your head and you think, oh no, I said something embarrassing 5 years ago and now I can't stop replaying it. There's no need to rewind and tape over the movie of your life. Even if that embarrassing moment that you can't stop thinking about really wasn't your finest moment. It's okay, we've all had those. The movie of your life is already good. It's an up and down, it's romantic, it's dramatic, it's comedic, it's an inspiring story on a VHS tape. And guess what? The movie isn't over. It's still in the making. Let me show you how. I'm Chad Lawson, and let's calm it down in 3, 2, 1. Do you remember how videotapes would get jammed in the VCR and then ribbons would get all tangled? That's a lot like how it feels to get stuck on a single moment in your life instead of letting it go. Your brain just gets jammed and stuck when it's focused on something that you wish you could go back in time and change. Like the time you said, "You too," to the waiter who said, "Enjoy your meal." I do that all the time. Or a biting remark you wish you would have made during an argument with someone 5 years ago. There was a study that was published in 2020 in the journal Nature Neuroscience. And they found that the human brain tends to fixate on negative experiences more than the positive ones. In other words, we're more likely to dwell on the bad stuff than the good. Scientists believe that this occurs because the way our brains are wired. When something happens that we view as negative, our brains will try to fixate on it in order to prevent it from happening again in the future. And while this may be helpful in some situations, it can also lead us into getting stuck in a negative thought loop. These themes that seem to be on constant rewind in your life, they're so small, but the mind just seems to make them the main plot of our story, right? It's all how we just look at it, though. Do you remember those 3D glasses that the movie theaters would hand out? How we view situations is a lot like wearing those 3D glasses. We tend to see our lives with a lens that depends a lot on our mood. If we're anxious, we're less likely to rewind and play the highlight reel. And we're more likely to watch every silly thing we've ever done or every wrong turn that we've ever taken. And when we're sad, we're spectators for the unhappiest memories and not our most meaningful ones. Our minds get jammed in the VCR when we view life with the wrong lens. This is how the movie of your life can become an intense thriller rather than a family comedy. Feelings of anxiety tell us that we're in danger when maybe we're not, or that our own memories are more frightening than what they really were. Like having a panic attack. Sometimes even when you can breathe a sigh of relief and feel safe now that the panic is gone, you can still feel afraid of panic attacks because you only remember the fear. It's like when you have a nightmare, right? And then you wake up and you're relieved it was just a dream, but then you start to think about the dream, how scary it was, and you start to get anxious all over again. You're relieved that the danger is gone, but then you start to think all of the things that could have happened and how scary that it would have been, and you start to get anxious all over again. But with the right lens on, you can rewind and see that you had a really scary experience, but you also calmed yourself down. You took some deep breaths, and you were able to comfort yourself until you felt better. Just like in movies, we always have the power to hit pause and take a step back. Doing this gives us a closer look at the situation and to be able to see it for what it may have been. More often than not, we'll find that it's not nearly as bad as it first seemed. Be kind when you rewind. Notice how you went from panicking to peaceful and then went on with your day. When you rewind, you see the full picture, and it might not be that bad of a movie scene after all. Most of us would like to think that if our life was made into a movie, it would be an action-packed thriller with a heart-pounding soundtrack to match. We would be the suave and courageous hero who always knew just what to say and do, and effortlessly saving the day and always getting the girl or the guy in the nick of time. Daniel Craig reminds me of this. But what about when you rewind your life and your movie seems to be more like an emotional drama? Without a doubt, we all go through periods of intense struggles or difficulties. But when you watch an actual movie on the silver screen, most of these characters do also. What shapes the character into someone that's complex or relatable, it's how they deal with those challenges, with those struggles, that difficulty. Your life is no different. Sure, you can't edit out the parts you don't like. You know, you are a real person. But that makes it even more special when you face hardships and come out on the other side as a stronger person. You didn't have a script or a movie set to help you. You learned. Your experiences, well, they're real. They matter. The challenging scenes of our movie are often what make us grow and change the most, developing new strengths and perspectives that maybe we didn't have before. So even though it may not feel like it at the time, these difficult seasons, these difficult scenes, well, they can actually be some of the most interesting and valuable parts of our movie, of our life. Maybe earlier you answered that yes, you would want to rewind and live your life all over again without changing anything. Your life, despite whatever has been thrown your way, has been wonderful enough for you to want to experience it again. And that's true, no matter how you answered my question. And if you don't feel like rewinding and looking towards the past at all, that's okay too. Because the amazing thing is that you've lived and you've got a lot more living to do. There's something to be excited about for a lot of reasons. How many times has the movie of your life felt like a romantic comedy, maybe? Think of all the times you danced and you sang and you fell in love, or the times you found yourself in a silly situation in the pursuit of a romantic comedy kind of romance. Be kind. Rewind doesn't just apply to things you wish you could change. It applies to the moments that brought you the most joy. Be kind as you reminisce. It just feels good to remember some of those moments. So when your tape gets jammed and you can't see the full picture, be kind as you untangle the ribbons and try to get the VCR going again. Learn to let go of the totally embarrassing, the awkward, the incredibly insignificant moments that your mind likes to hold on to so tightly. You'll get a lot of second, and third, and fourth chances in life. And yes, sometimes you'll cringe. That's just a part of life. Sometimes you will cringe. But in the movies of your life, all these scenes will provide some comic relief. People say life isn't like the movies, and they're right. It's better. There's no director's cut. There's no script for you to read from. There's no props or wardrobe. Nothing works out exactly as you plan. But there are twists, there are turns, and plenty of unexpected plot lines. A whole host of unique characters, and lots of romance and ups and downs of all kinds. And you're not going to get better entertainment than that. Trust me. But with the right pair of 3D lens and the ability to find humor and letting go, you can be kind to yourself when you do rewind. The story of your life isn't over yet. There's no need to tape over what's happened so far. Life is much funnier, it's more interesting, it's more exciting than anything you'll see on the big screen. The show of life is always playing. You can find it anywhere, in the stars on a clear night, or in the sun shining through the trees, or in the smile of a baby, or the playfulness of your pet. It's everywhere. Life. It's always on, always worth watching. So the next time you're looking for something to watch, grab some popcorn, or maybe a few cookies, head outside. And the show of life has already started, and you're just in time to see what happens next. For more episodes, concert dates, or to send me some delicious chocolate chip cookies, visit CalmItDownPodcast.com. This podcast was written and produced by yours truly, Chad Lawson, composer, pianist, and nationally recognized sweet tooth. Now, before we part ways, I want to remind you that the views, expressions, and techniques in this episode are of my personal opinion and not intended to serve as a substitute for medical advice or diagnoses rendered to you by your individual doctor or other healthcare provider. Please seek the advice of a licensed physician or therapist for any medical or emotional concerns. I'm not a licensed therapist or physician, but I am an empath by nature, and I hope this and future podcast episodes can aid your emotional needs. To find a list of licensed professionals in your area, visit CalmItDownPodcast.com. And if you enjoy this podcast and want to support the time, the person involved, and content you hear each week, please consider pitching in $2 or $3 a month. Your contribution will help keep this podcast ad-free. Visit CalmItDownPodcast.com, look for the white coffee cup with the heart in the center, or scan the QR code at the bottom of the page. Again, CalmItDownPodcast.com. Remember, be kind to your mind. And join me next week as we calm it down.